Good morning. This is Solomon Jones on 900 AM WURD, the Wake Up with Word show. I want to welcome State Senator Anthony Hardy Williams. He worked as a corporate analyst, as an executive for PepsiCo, and launched his own vending company prior to joining the Pennsylvania legislature, first as state representative for the 191st District in 1988, then as state senator of the 8th District in 1998. Now serving his 17th year in the Senate, he is a Democratic candidate for mayor. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming in. So, I want to talk about education. That is the most important issue as identified in a poll by Philadelphia voters. But I understand that you have something going on around the issue of crime. So I want to give you a chance to talk about that.
Thank you. And I appreciate you doing that. So there are three things we're talking about: education, job creation, opportunity, and public safety. And in public safety space, if you're an African American in this country, there's a lot of tension that exists between our community and the policing community. My own neighborhood, Cops Creek, is one of those areas that has felt that tension over the last several years. And what I've tried to do is speak practically and honestly about the condition. None of us are going to remove the reality that we want police in our community. The question is how we go about doing it. And most recently, unfortunately, two things happened tragically. Robert Wilson III died. He's 3 blocks from my home, a neighbor of mine. And of course, we have continued to have these incidents where police officers interact with the public in inappropriate ways. So the Brown Tate family is in the middle of their tragedy. And both families are going through pain. They both lost their sons. And what I've released in a public statement, and it's kind of you to acknowledge it because some other people haven't acknowledged it, is that I basically have said that both families are going through a lot of pain, but one family will have the benefit of answers. There'll be a trial. There'll be videotape. There'll be conversation around it. And there will be an answer. It may not be complete all the answers as to what happened or why it happened on that day, why somebody chose to take Robert Wilson's life on that day, but there will be a trial. In the case of the young man who unfortunately was shot and killed by police officers, to this point there has not been that type of conclusion. And I think that what you see and what we saw most recently at a protest was frustration and pain. Now, I'm not an advocate for people throwing over chairs or pushing anybody, but protest is a part of American policy. And more importantly, it indicates that there's a level of frustration that we have to accommodate. And so I've called for what I think all of us need, and that's an independent set of eyes, review the set of facts, and reveal before the public what actually happened so that they can have some confidence in the judicial system. Not that I don't want to claim an indictment on my friend Seth Williams, and he is my friend. I think he's a professional. I think he does the best he can do. I believe the commissioner's doing the best that he can do, but I do believe that the public deserves to feel that just like police officers have an arbiter when they have their contract, the public has the same right. The second thing I've also called for is a teeth put behind the police advisory board in Philadelphia. We have one, and I think that would give some level of confidence to the public with regard to other people reviewing it who are not necessarily taking one side versus the other. And the final thing I've said is publicly is that we have our own police commissioner who is a part of a national task force. And the president has said, here are a number of things that should happen in the public space as it relates to policing if we want to have true community policing. Our commissioner has supported it. And I called upon other candidates to do the same thing. Unfortunately, I think the FOP has taken a position publicly that the moment it was written that they felt that it wasn't worth the paper it was written on. Literally the words of John McNesby,
the president,
which I think is unfortunate. And so I think that for anybody who's running for mayor, they have to accept the reality that it is a big city. And all of us feel and want to be safe in that city, police officers and the public. And so while I don't want to, fan the flames of one side versus the other, what I want to do is make a practical approach to resolving the separation between police officers and our community and making it safer. And I'll close on this. I have a number of African-American officers who are friends and non-African-American officers who are friends of mine. And they speak of the pain that they see in their own neighborhoods. They live in our communities, okay? And they recognize the tension. They want to find a way to get to a place where they both feel more comfortable about doing their jobs all across the city of Philadelphia.
So you're calling for all the other candidates to accept and there's 63 recommendations that 21st Century Police Task Force asked for, including independent investigations of shootings.
Absolutely.
Okay. And so you've got of course, your main competitor at this point is Jim Kenney, right? And so he's been endorsed by the FOP. Now, the cynic in some folks would say that you're kind of painting him into a corner by forcing him to take a position on something that the folks who endorsed him have already come out against.
And I think people, when they look at politics, should be cynical, and they should vet it, and they should ask us all these difficult questions. So the question is, where was Tony Williams before this actually happened? Yeah. And I've been doing this work since I was a teenager. And so Neighborhoods United Against Drugs, my dad's own anti-violence, gang stuff that I was a teenager involved in. The question has always been about how we resolve policing issues in our community. I've always been a part of that, and I've taken risk sometimes in doing it in terms of marches and et cetera. So, I think people should be cynical.
But are you painting Jim Kenney into a corner and forcing him to come out and say...
I'm doing no more to any candidate than they would do to me, and that is question my credentials on any particular issue that I raise. Okay. And so if it happens to fall on one particular person, then it falls on one particular person. He has the total, just like Lynn Abraham or anyone else, Doug Oliver, or anyone else who's running, has the total ability to accept what the President of the United States and our own police commissioner has stated. And, with all due respect, one of the candidates has said, look, our current commissioner is a great man. I think I'd like to have him remain on. Well, if he signs onto it, it should be good enough for that person to sign onto it. Yeah. And so whatever corner they're in, they need to make sure that they're never boxed in terms of any issue, because it requires us to be working diligently for every Philadelphian. It requires us to step above the limitations of politics, especially in this particular case, because people's lives are on the line.
Yeah. So I do want to move to education, because that is and has been identified as the biggest issue by Philadelphians, both those with people with children in schools and those who don't have children in our schools. Now, you sit on the education committee in Harrisburg. Yep. You were in Harrisburg when the funding went up under Rendell. You were there when it went down under Corbett. Do you believe Harrisburg is responsible for the current state of Philadelphia schools? And as someone who sits on the education committee and is in Harrisburg, what responsibility do you personally think that you have for the conditions of our schools right now? So
I think the conditions of our schools have been certainly exacerbated by what happened under the previous Governor Corbett. No doubt about that. But the reality is, those of us who live in neighborhoods like I do recognize that education has been an issue for a generation since people have been deserting the public schools in Philadelphia. Unfortunately, over the last 20 plus years, the school district has gone up for over 200,000 plus students, down to about 130 or 40,000 traditional neighborhood public schools. Primarily those who have means. It means people who are middle class and above have decided to go someplace else, either move or put their kids in private schools. So we've had a problem for a long time. And it existed even before charters existed, before the SRC existed. Matter of fact, we almost went bankrupt before the SRC came in place. People just didn't deal with it because it was certain types of folks who were feeling the brunt of it. Now, the reality is the dropout rate is almost 50%. 10 children in public schools in Philadelphia, 4 drop out before they get to high school. Of the 6 remaining, 3 may be able to apply to college, and of the 3, only 1 graduates. We've had this problem for a long time. That said, funding, which people talk about a lot today, is an extremely important part of that. And I do have a responsibility, regardless of the conditions in Philadelphia, Harrisburg, to support public education. All public schools, and I've done that. So since 2010, there have been bills that people ask, including the PFD, have asked to be passed through legislature. It was a $45 million grant, a 1% sales tax increase, and a cigarette tax. None of which are popular, none of which would make me popular, but are tough votes. But not only did I take the votes, but I actually moved the bills myself. They were my bills. Yeah. So that went through a Republican House, Republican Senate, and signed by a Republican governor. And I don't have to tell you that there's not a lot of interest in Harrisburg about Philadelphia public schools. Right. But they were mine. And out of everybody running, I hear a lot of people talking about what they're going to do and what the responsibility Harrisburg has. I've taken that charge and actually brought more money than anybody running to all public schools in Philadelphia County.
Well, I think that the cigarette tax bill, for me, is a little bit troubling, because there's an amendment at the end of that cigarette tax bill that is an amendment that forced the SRC to consider more charters. It was almost like a trap. right? It was a quid pro quo. I mean, you could say that it was a concession to those who were in favor of that. But how do you fund more charter schools when you can't pay for the schools you already have? So why force us to look at that?
So first of all, on the issue of whether we should have more charters or not, I don't think anybody, including you, and I read your stuff. You are a solid citizen.
Thank you.
In particular, a good dad.
I appreciate
sort
that.
Sort of like me,
try.
Old school. I like that. So I don't think anybody can morally say if there's a good school that's going to open, we shouldn't open it. And I don't care whether it's a charter or magnet or a neighborhood school. There's not going to be anybody in this campaign that I think, or frankly, a citizen who says, well, it's a good school, but it's a charter school, we shouldn't open. Why would we say that? If we know we have a school that's not working in the neighborhood, we should open it now. And we should argue that we need to find the money, which everybody does for traditional publics. We need to find the money. Well, why wouldn't you say the same for any public school, be it a charter, magnet, or neighborhood school? You should argue that we find the money for a good school supporting our community, okay? That said, the issue of the quid pro quo and the conditions under which all of us Democrats operate in Harrisburg. The big dog right now is the Republican Party, and by a significant margin in the House and in the Senate. Yeah. And so when you sit down at the table, there's going to be give and take. This governor presented a budget which I think is extraordinary, but there's going to be give and take. It will not be the final version. And I would hope that nobody would say, well, because we didn't get 100%, we shouldn't do 50%. Mm-hmm. And in this case, regarding schools, we needed the money, and we were going to close other schools if we didn't get the money. And so when they said, okay, here's our amendment, it wasn't that myself or others agree with it, because frankly, all Democrats eventually voted for this, all of them. It wasn't that we agreed with it so much as it was necessary to move forward. And the consequence of that is that there were some additional charter schools open, but they weren't certainly in the number or magnitude that people who were making those demands in Harrisburg wanted. Yeah. There were 5 additional charter schools, which clearly are adding value to schools. They were replacing seats that already existed. So, in fact, you didn't add more cost onto the district. You just added a replacement.
Not this year.
Yeah, but I mean, well, there's going to be additional. Yeah, you're going to be adding additional costs, whether it's a charter or traditional public school, next year, no matter what. Mm-hmm. And if we don't take the responsibility from Harrisburg or City Hall, for that matter, to add more money to public education, it's not going to be about charters. It's going to be about the Philadelphia School District is in trouble financially, period, and that we don't have the resources to run it properly.
Okay, so I looked at some of the stuff from the Education Committee. There was a hearing in February of 2011 on SB 1. It was a bill proposing vouchers, which is taking public money and helping people to pay to send their kids to private schools. Here's what the record from that meeting says. Senator Williams stated, "We're designing a public education system that may include the private sector." A witness then took issue with the constitutionality of the legislation and accountability of private schools, and here's what you said. There is accountability. Parents decide with their voucher that their child is receiving the adequate education that they have designed for them. There is accountability, and it's not the one you want. You want one that mirrors the traditional system, which is still mired with theft, bribery, collusion, patronage. That's the public system you hold with such high regard. So that's the end of that quote. Do you hold the public system with low regard? And if so, why?
So I hold the public system that has a 50% dropout rate for the last 25 years with a non-accountable account. There has been no one, while these children are graduating as valedictorians and going off to work and can't complete an application. There's been no one who, I have a high school in my district, Bartram, 2 adult teachers knocked out.
Yeah.
Children go back to the building as if it's a normal process.
Yeah, I've been to Bartram, did some work in Bartram.
Right, so have I, and I do it all the time. Yeah. There's been no one who's held account this system that allows people to go to work in conditions that are deplorable for the professional teacher as well as the child. And so when I made that statement, that was born out of the pain, frustration, and wanting to shout out what I see every day, as opposed to commercials who want to sort of paint over that, this is a place that is working. It's not working. It hasn't worked for a long time. And thank God we're at a moment in an election where people are going to hold all of us to some account about it. And so while people want to sort of narrowly draw me in on specific items, which I'm okay to talk about, because the voucher, which is not something I obviously as a mayor I would institute or participate in. And so people, when they ask me the question, I can honestly say I'm not going to be the voucher mayor. That's not what I want to do.
So you're no longer for vouchers?
No, I didn't say, look, this is not a part of the conversation. It's not a state issue. There's nothing to my knowledge that we're voting upon to discuss it. It's not a part of my platform. It's not something I plan to institute. But it's something I don't run away from. And the run away from is the reality that for every public person I hold who's in office today, who honestly will tell you transfer slips are more increased today. And before, people were sort of quote unquote doing the hookup, somebody that they knew, a principal, an administrator, or superintendent that they knew to get their child transferred to a different school. Then more and more people decide to move their children out of public education. And now charter schools. You have a third of your public school district where people are using charter schools. And of that, 30,000 more, almost half of your district, parents, low, modest income parents want to find an alternative.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to fix it. We should.
We're talking with State Senator Anthony Hardy Williams, who is running for mayor. One of the big issues that came up in previous weeks was the Philadelphia School Partnership offering $25 million for charter schools, another $10 million for public schools in order to help. And of course, there were those, including one of your opponents, who said the district should not accept the money because it was tied to, quote, unnamed millionaires who already have far too great an influence in our upcoming mayoral election. And that was Jim Kenney who said that. You, however, said the school district should consider accepting the money, even though PSP said on this air that they would not reveal who the donors are until after the district had accepted the money. And even then, the district would have had to sign an agreement basically giving PSP some oversight over how that money was spent. Why do you believe it's okay for the district to take that money from PSP's
Same reason
donors?
they took it from Walter Annenberg.
Okay.
Because we needed it.
But we knew who Walter Annenberg was.
And guess
we don't know who these people are.
Well, you read the Inquirer today, you know who they are.
Yeah, well, I saw the Inquirer today.
Okay, so I mean, all the conversation about.
So are those the people?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
But I mean, and if they said that they're going to, reveal later on after they accept the money, take the money. Now, absent the fact that these people are, running from the law, or they did something inappropriate, or something like that. Why are we making political conversations out? And by the way, I made a counter offer. I didn't say accept that offer. What I said was increase the offer, split the money through traditional neighborhoods and charters. That's what I actually said, and that's what I support. And I think anybody else, that's ridiculous. That's sort of like saying I don't have money to keep the lights on in the school, find books, and they want to put counselors back, but we got to find the right donor. That doesn't make any sense other than a political gain and pandering. That's ridiculous. And so I feel strongly that if you're about these kids, about these teachers, about these people who've been laid off, then take the money and get them back to school, especially if they say they're willing to reveal it later on. Just increase the amount of money. I don't understand how we approach these conversations from a limited, puritanical. This is not theory. This is not theory. Anybody who's watched what happens in schools that are around my home, this is like life and death.
Yeah.
And so somebody came to offer me money that I don't like, and I'm going to worry about I don't like them?
Well, if you got to sign an agreement with them, which you do, for all of PSP's grants, whoever the grantee is has to sign an agreement giving them some oversight.
Central High School had a library built. Okay.
Yeah.
$4 million. Not everyone knew who contributed to it.
But we knew that they were alumni of Central High School.
Okay.
So they
had some anonymous donors.
Right. But I think that's a different thing because
Why?
The alumni is not saying you have to then sign an agreement with us giving us some oversight.
Yes, they did. It had to be for the library.
Not knowing who these people are. If you know that this is a class gift, right, to Central High School, I just think that's a little bit different.
Yeah, because you want it to be different.
No, I think it is different.
Solomon, listen to me. Follow your logic. You're a very logical person.
Okay.
Anonymous donor to one high school. Not, by the way, not benefiting more than one high school.
Right.
One of the best high schools in Philadelphia. That is a special admissions high school. I couldn't get in it. Okay, you probably did, but no.
I got in Northeast. Central was our enemy.
All right, so so you're not one of those who walk around like, I'm in class 194.
No,
whatever. Okay,
no.
My point is that they chose a high school.
Right.
Okay.
The high school that they went to.
I don't care what it is.
Okay.
All the other high schools needed a library too, right?
Mm-hmm.
They chose a high school that probably most of those kids had a capability to go home and use a computer to find what they didn't have.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other high schools in the district needed money for kids that needed the library, and they got it from anonymous donors, and it was required to go to the library. Nobody, not a peep. It's okay.
That's because it's a class gift.
I don't care what it's a class gift or not.
Don't you think that's
it's a
different?
need. What, a class gift?
A class gift as compared to gifts from anonymous donors from
anonymous donor
from PSP, which makes folks sign agreements to say we have some oversight over what you do.
Anonymous donors from Central High School sign an agreement to fix one specific high school library.
Right.
I don't see how that.
You don't see how that's different? Okay.
No. The difference is what you just said. But understand this. The relevance of the argument that I hear is like, well, the district needs all this stuff and everything. Why didn't the district push back and say, whoa, I'm glad that you all have enough money for Central High School, but frankly, the need is someplace else. It's in West Philadelphia High School that needs a library, okay?
Okay.
It's in Gratson needs a library. That's where we need some libraries, okay, in technology.
It's just like Penn. It's like a class from Penn saying, okay, we're going to donate a statue, or a class from Penn State saying we're going to do a statue for Joe Paterno. It's the same thing with graduates from Central saying we want to give a library to our alma mater.
Penn.
That's different from PSP saying as an outside source, they don't have nothing. They never went to the school. They don't have anything to do with it, saying we want to give this money to you, but we're not going to tell you where it comes from, and you got to sign something, and we're not going to tell you until after you take the money.
Penn is a private university, not a public school. Mm-hmm. Public schools have a responsibility to the larger public, okay? And that's my view. Now, that said, I do understand the class gift and you know, being enthusiastic. I get that. Okay. But the point I'm saying is in this space where there's so much need, you said they had to sign an agreement and then they had to accept the money. Fine, accept the money. And if you discover the guy's on the run from, San Denise, to break the agreement, okay? But the bottom line is, in the meantime, these folks need to come back to work. These counselors need to come back to work, and there's a lot of money.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So in terms of money, let's talk about money, because you have the most money out of the candidates according to the finance reports that we've seen to this point. So the Susquehanna International Group from Bala Cynwyd, those are the guys who are in the paper today. Supported your run for governor in 2010. They've donated nearly $500,000 to two political action committees, presumably to support your mayoral campaign. Believe Again PAC, Education Equity. There are a number of groups, and these groups are all outside of Philadelphia. They're all political action committees. Do you think that you are too connected to political action committees that are pro-charter and that are outside of Philadelphia?
So I think that, one, I want to make sure we talk about other issues in addition to this.
Yes, absolutely.
But I think that I have raised money, which, people are writing a lot about, prospective folks who are going to support my campaign. I'm the only person who they write about like that. And there's a person who's going on air, who has ads on air as we speak.
Yeah.
The only ads that I'm aware are by a political action committee. Jim Kenney's ads are not paid by him, by a political action committee. I saw one article. I haven't seen any interviews. Nobody has questioned him. People are writing about what people think they're going to do for me and not writing about what people are actually doing for somebody else. And by the way, they come from one particular person and one particular group.
Okay.
And no one has raised an iota of interest about how these ads are paid for, where they come from, what type of people are these that are supporting the ad. And I think, frankly, it'd be very interesting, in particular African-American listeners, about who's supporting these ads that are running on behalf of Jim Kenney. So, I'm more than willing to take responsibility for my part, but when are people going to be balancing their approach about everybody being questioned about this? I'm the only person that people are asking this question. Why? Why? And so, no, I don't think I'm too aligned with any particular person, because what I've done, for me, my ads will go on TV. They will be paid by my campaign under the current rules of limitations and caps. And so when people see my campaign finance report, which they didn't write much about, they saw a broad array of people who supported my campaign array. People who gave me $50, $100, $2,900, whatever those limits are. There are a lot of people who gave me money who come from a very, very diverse background and experiences. That's what is in my campaign account. So when people said I had the most money, I had the most money of the broadest array of people in the campaign structure. No one else can say that. Okay. And these ads that are going up today, the ads that are on TV today, the only ads on TV today are paid by an independent expenditure that supports Jim Kenney. And they use Jim Kenney's face. And they come from a very narrow band of trade people who, frankly, I'm not sure how inclusive they are of my community. And no one has said a word about that. They don't write about it in the press, and they know about it. And they choose not to write about it. But we're going to make them write about it, because we're going to talk about it. So people are going to talk about mine, I'm going to talk about theirs. Okay,
fair enough. Now, he's supported by one part of the trade unions that you just referred to, but you're supported by another. You're supported by the Carpenters, right? They got a big sign, Tony Williams. So, in terms of the inclusiveness of all the building trades, none of them have been really inclusive of black folks. The Carpenters, I know I wrote about a lawsuit by some sisters who sued them, and as well as the electricians who are supporting your opponent, Jim Kenney.
Not just the electricians.
Okay, and some other folks as well. He has, right? But I want to get to the question about your campaign. So, in terms of the Carpenters supporting you, as mayor, would you make them be more inclusive on taxpayer-funded projects than they have been to this point?
I have. So when they built the stadium in Philadelphia, the stadium which people talked about, they came to Harrisburg. All of the trades came to Harrisburg, and asked about it's good for jobs. And I said, great. Who's going to get employed? Out of that, we created a program called Diversity Apprenticeship Program, which required the trades to take in people of color specifically to the trades. That project was one of the most diverse projects in the history of public funding in Philadelphia. That came as a direct intervention from me.
What were the percentages?
That was 10 years ago. Okay. I'll be honest, I couldn't tell you right off the top of my head because you have to go to each contractor.
Okay.
But I do remember the consequence of that, and that people talked about that. And frankly, people took a lot of credit for it. And I was proud to build a relationship with then Sam Staton Sr., who actually came to me, who was head of the laborers at the time, now his son, Sam Staton Jr. Out of that grew a wonderful relationship with the premier trade group that covers a significant majority portion of people of color.
Yeah.
And so that has been a part of my track record. Yes, I've not only will talk about doing it, I've done it. And I'm the only one running who's done it. Okay. So when people talk about that, I want them, I'm glad you brought it up, because yes, not only would I do it, but I've done it and know how to continue to do it.
The only thing about the diversity apprenticeship program and what I remember of it, having just been around and worked in politics, we still don't have representative numbers in any of the building trades. And we don't have representative numbers on those jobs. We're about 45% of the population. We never get that much on the job. So how do we make sure, as mayor, how would you make sure that we got those percentages on the job?
So the mayor has a tremendous level of influence in terms of the private sector. So you talked about the public sector. The public sector is low-hanging fruit that will not sustain anyone in terms of living. I mean, if you have a government job, great. But the bottom line is, in terms of how you build things in Philadelphia, it's mostly the private sector, and the consequence of it is the mayor having relationships with people in the private sector, such as Penn, which you mentioned earlier, which also had a similar program created because of the involvement of my father and myself. Those relationships, as a mayor, allow us to talk directly to people who want zoning, people who need grants, people who need tax credits, people who need them to fight in going to Harrisburg in terms of bringing back RCAP money or a variety of others. I've done all that. And all the development that I've been associated with has that representation in it. And frankly, some people will brag to you that they have close to 40, 50% on occasion of these jobs. And we can bring them out, and they will be out in front of me. So this is an issue that I have singularly struggled with for a long time, and pushed from a singular legislator, not a chief executive perspective, a legislator's perspective, the needs and the consequence of that involvement.
Okay. This will be my last question. So Philadelphia has the highest poverty rate of any large city in America. It's actually gone up since 2008. What have you done to fix it as a state legislator, and what do you plan to do to fix it as mayor?
So 2 of the things we talked about, fought for and fight for better schools in my neighborhood and take on people who challenge me about better schools, the type of better schools. The first thing is the same thing that, has liberated my family, that had no money, came from poverty. Education. The better educated you are, the better opportunity you have, and the better chance you have in America. What you do with it once you have it is up to you. But fighting for good schools and neighborhoods is the first thing. The second thing is what you hear me talk a lot about business. I've been a small business owner. And so a number of my friends are reentering. They're coming back to a workforce that may not greet them because they may not hire them. So the second best thing is start it yourself. Get your own hustle. Do your own grind. And so we have to be much more friendly in neighborhoods, much more friendly in small business, much more practical about L&I. And so when you go down there now, you're a barber. You can't afford to take a day and a half off to get permits, but guess what? You have to cross your finger and figure out what's going to happen to you when you end up down there. So we're going to streamline L&I so that just like when you get your Apple phone fixed, you have an appointment. Your doctor's appointment, you make an appointment. All those things we're going to streamline, align forms so that when one goes in, they can do it in a practically effective way. And we're going to take all these incentives. You hear a lot about abatements across Philadelphia. We're going to drive those abatements out the neighborhoods. So a law firm that wants a big law firm, we should put it on 60th, 52nd Street, the Golden Triangle in Latino community. We should put it on American Avenue so that secondary businesses have a chance. And we're going to give preferences to Philadelphia. The DNC will be here next year. The Pope will be here this year. A variety, Jay-Z is here. Yeah. I'm tired of seeing these T-shirts sold by kids that are not getting much money. Why don't we have a Philadelphia preference? Rather than being manufactured in China, it should be manufactured in Philadelphia.
Okay. So we're going to end it here. That is State Senator Tony Williams, who is running for mayor. We appreciate you coming to join us for a few minutes here this morning on Wake Up with Word.
Solomon, I will be back.
Okay.
At your request. You won't have to shout at me from the car coming down the street anymore.
Okay. All right.
Scaring me to death. I'm a black man. I thought somebody was my bill collector.
Well, you coming on my show,
yeah, right.
Man.
I thought a bill collector was coming after me. I was running. I will come back, my man.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Bless you.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks,
Thank
man.
you.
Appreciate it.
All right.